Call to order this regular meeting of the Board of Lane County Commissioners. Today is Tuesday, July 16th. Welcome to everyone joining us here in Harris Hall and to anyone watching online. Before we get to our regular agenda this morning, we do have a prepared statement from our county administrator to present on behalf of the organization. Good morning, Steve Mokryski. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, Commissioners. Good morning to you. This last weekend, an inexcusable act of political violence was committed. We at Lane County denounce political violence of any kind. It is antithetical to our democracy and something that should neither be tolerated nor encouraged. Across Lane County, there are thousands of residents who serve as elected, appointed, or volunteer leaders throughout local governments and community organizations. In fact, we're going to hear from our elections staff this morning about the elections process this November. It's important that these individuals are able to fulfill their roles without the threat of violence or intimidation. Communities are stronger when thoughtful and respectful discourse is the norm. We are committed to do our part to ensure the peaceful continuance of the democratic system that underpins our nation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Mr. Mokryski. We appreciate you. Moving on to our regular business, and thank you everyone for your attention to that message. Are there any adjustments to the agenda from administration this morning, from the board? Seeing none, any emergency business? Great. Then we will move directly into public comment. We will start with folks who have come to Harris Hall to present to the board in person this morning. Then I'll check in with Tanya to see if anyone is signed up online to give testimony, and then I'll return in case anyone arrived late and still wishes to address the board this morning. When I call your name, please step to the podium, state your name for the record, and at that time your 3 minutes will begin. There's a clock up on the wall. And we will begin this morning with Patty Chappell, who will be followed by Charles C. Kaler. Good morning, welcome. Please state your name for the record.
Okie dokie. Patty Chappell. I am from West Lane, out in the Veneta area, and I have another board director from EPUD who's rather saddened to have to meet you all here, those of you that I haven't met this morning, on this subject of the IMRF. I've got to say right off the bat, Ms. Traeger, that there is not enough methane for everybody by any means whatsoever. I've been involved with EPUD for several decades and have seen the benefits of the Short Mountain Power Plant firsthand. Since the early 1990s, EPUD customers have enjoyed reliable, low-cost power from this local resource. And as you know, we are committed to our partnership with Lane County out at Short Mountain. In 2019, we helped fund a comprehensive engineering study to determine additional steps to increase gas recovery. This resulted in a near doubling of our budget out there at the landfill, and the capture rate has since increased dramatically. In 2022, we entered a memorandum of understanding with the county, particularly with your Public Works Department and Northwest Natural, to explore additional ways to optimize Short Mountain operations. We were excited at that time to move forward towards world-class levels of landfill gas management, which makes it all the more frustrating to see the county now changing course without engaging EPUD. To be clear, for the record, this IMRF, or now as it's called, Clean Lane Project, was developed with virtually no input from us at EPUD. We first found out about the Goshen site involvement from EPUD staff. We found out about that was being considered by talking to a third-party engineer, not ever from Public Works. We were never once consulted about the option of placing the digester at the landfill, which is what our contract anticipates with you, our partners, the county. We've been going steady for a long time, 40 years. It's tough to break up this way, and we don't want to. As we considered a renewable gas project throughout 21 and 22, we kept the county Public Works well informed of our plans, with a half a dozen meetings to discuss the impact. This is in stark contrast to the county's pursuit of the IMRF, in which we were not asked for formal input until October of 2023, only a month before it came before you for a vote. At this point, however, there is obviously division in the Public Works Department, that's been made clear to us from staff at Public Works. There's a division there. The project does not pencil out, and the rate impacts will not pass muster with the cities or my 40,000 customers, residents, and your constituents. We were actually explicitly coached on how to make comments and help stop this project. It's a bad deal, and particularly in these times. Okay,
Thank you for your public
you're welcome.
comment. Next up is Charles C. Kaler, who will be followed by Max Liebrich.
Good morning, Chair Trieger, Commissioners Buck, Senega, Farr, and Lovell. I'm Charles A. Kaler, Vice President of the League of Women Voters of Lane County, to speak for the League's position on the proposed charter amendments still under your consideration. The League supports the Charter Review Committee's recommendation to repeal Sections 33, 34, and 35. Specifically, voters can understand that no purpose is served by retaining obsolete language in a modern charter. In fact, a more up-to-date, workable charter could be achieved. Good housekeeping. Please put to the voters the redistricting amendment as recommended by the Independent Charter Committee. The committee formed a diverse representation of the people of Lane County in a well-informed, thoughtful, and transparent way to further a one-person, one-vote method of redistricting. In this age of distrust in politics, you could shore up the confidence in the system by supporting the idea of voters choosing their politicians, not politicians choosing their voters. Thank you for your time, and especially your service to the people of Lane County. Thank you. See you later.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up is Max Liebrich, followed by Keith Beskett.
My name is Max Liebrich, and I'm specifically talking to Pat Farr. I've called your office several times the past few weeks, and I have not had the courtesy to get a call back. I would like to know why Lane County's Housing Good for Homes has discriminated against me for the past 14 years, not allowing me to accept rental vouchers. Beth Oates, the supervisor of this program, has single-handedly banned me from this rental program without any factual reason. She's offered reinstatement program, but there are no guidelines to follow her solution. She has made demands from me that she does not require from the other 700 property owners or managers that are using the voucher program. Can you please explain to me why Lane County government allows one person to hide behind her position to discriminate and degrade me and others as she pleases? Is the only situation for solving this problem a legal situation, or is there something we can solve in a more personal situation? You, Pat Farr, can help solve this solution. You are here to represent me, and I'm asking you to do that. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Next, I'll welcome to the podium Keith Beskett, who will be followed by Darvin, having a little trouble with the last name, so I'll ask you to pronounce it when you come to the podium, please.
Good morning. Keith Beskett, as you said. Thank you very much for giving me a few moments. I just once again wanted to come back and talk about my property on the Mackenzie River that I've brought up 5 times with you folks so far. Basically, I just want to ask you straight out to reverse the exception in the Lane Code or statute number 14. I'll give you specifics when you see me next Tuesday. As I said before, I've owned the property now for about 7 years, and I was approved for a non-farm dwelling. It's also been approved 4 other times. Unfortunately and oddly, the first 2 times the people passed away before they could build. The 3rd time, they sold. The 4th time, it was appealed and denied. And then one of those times was myself, and it was appealed 5 days beyond the appeal date, which is very odd to me. And the more I keep asking, it's rare if it's ever happened ever at Lane County that their special friend was able to come in and appeal almost a week late. I asked the judge in the appeal. He said that the county was satisfied with that. If I was late on an appeal, they'd just laugh at me. But their friend, they let him appeal this 5 days after the deadline, and everybody's okay with that. Any other deadline you miss, they check you off so quickly your head spins. It's embarrassing that you guys allow this, right? The county, the commissioners are in charge, right? You guys are the bosses of the land use, and this is how they act, and no one says a thing. They do this nonstop. We need to make some changes here. This is disgusting. The appeal itself was for the road. It wasn't even for my property. It was outside of the property. I actually was approved to build on my property. But they came back on this late appeal and said it was the road. They said the road was too low. And they couldn't even define the road. The judge couldn't even define if it was a road or an easement or a driveway. They had to come back 3 hours later and explain to me that they thought it was an easement because they really didn't know, and they made up the definition. It was just a total debacle. I mean, the judge literally had to ask them, what are we going to stop this guy on? It was pathetic. And here we sit, giving them all the power. This is it's just old. I mean, I've been doing this for 7 years now, right? I've applied 3 times and basically have won every time, and then I'm stopped on appeal for some bizarre reason that they make up. I'm kind of sick of it. I even asked the judge straight up, which I think I just mentioned, what's going on with the appeal? That's not even legal. And he said, well, the county has satisfied that, so it's okay. That was the reasoning. And I can't ask the judge anything. They won't allow me to. I'm happy for the fact that we're going to hopefully start appeals here, that we can come to our commission board, the people that we voted for, not the people that are unelected, that seem to be making all the decisions. I'm hoping that I can come here so you guys can laugh and see how ridiculous it is and approve this so I can move forward. I've got 22 acres and I'm just trying to build a little teeny house so I have someplace to live.
Thank you for your public comment.
Thank you. I'll see you next week.
Next up is Darvin, is it Fourvier? I'll ask you to please, your writing is tidy but tiny, and so I'll ask you please to state your full name for the record, and your time will begin, and you will be followed by Kyle Roadman.
Thank you. Good morning. Darvin Fowler is my name. I work at Summit Bank here in town, the only bank headquartered in Eugene. First, to Lane County and Commissioners, thank you for your service to our community and for your past and present support. I'm here today to ask Lane County to partner with Summit Bank by banking locally. Community banks are vital to thriving local economies, including ours. We use customer deposits to redeploy money to small businesses and nonprofits that are geographically located here in Lane County. 152 of the loans that we issued in Lane County in 2023 were under $250,000, with the average loan being $103,000. We've helped Lane County manufacturers buy new equipment, local entrepreneurs finance the startup of their new small businesses, retail stores with lines of credit, business owners to build and purchase new buildings, and have provided affordable housing loans to nonprofits that are headquartered here. From everyday banking to walking a person through their first business loan from start to finish, we're here to help. We care about Lane County. Many of our 104 local colleagues serve on boards and or committees for local nonprofits. Last year, Summit Bank gave more than $200,000 in donations to nonprofits and arts organizations in Lane County, including but not limited to United Way of Lane County, Food for Lane County, Homes for Good, and Catholic Community Services. As a group, our colleagues volunteered 1,173 hours to support local nonprofits here in Lane County. Summit Bank was started in 2004 by a group of local business people who saw a need for a local community bank to support local businesses. Now 20 years later, and now at $1.1 billion in assets, we're the only bank headquartered in the Springfield, Eugene area, and the second largest bank headquartered in Oregon. By contrast, Umpqua Bank, the largest Oregon bank, is a $52 billion institution and has recently moved their headquarters to Tacoma, Washington. County dollars belong here, locally, at a bank headquartered in our community in order to maximize local impact of those dollars. Please consider depositing additional funds at Summit Bank. Thank you again for your service to our community and for your consideration.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up is Kyle Roadman, who will be followed by Andy O'Brown.
Good morning, Commissioners. Kyle Roadman, General Manager of EPUD. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. As our board president remarked in public testimony last month, we are certainly tired of coming here. I'm sure you're tired of having us. Nonetheless, someone needs to be a voice for the more than 40,000 Lane County citizens that we are proud to call customers. As I'm sure you're well aware, the people of Lane County are dealing with a once-in-a-generation cost of living crisis. A recent article in Forbes placed Oregon as one of the top 10 most expensive states in which to live, while our average disposable income is ranked just 31st. As a public agency, we take this situation seriously, and we're doing our level best not to contribute to the problem. I can assure you this is not easy. The electric utility industry is facing unprecedented cost pressure related to power supply shortfalls, supply chain challenges, and the impact of extreme weather events. We've seen our peers in the industry announce rate increases over the past year of between 15 and 30%, which adds anywhere between $20 and $30 per month to utility bills. We have enough to deal with without the county's actions to diminish our fuel supply at Short Mountain. This iMurph or Clean Lane or whatever the latest rebrand attempt is taking gas that we could use to generate local, low-cost power for our customers. This will need to be replaced with power that can be 5 to 10 times as expensive. The troubling narrative that appears to be developing is that, yes, EPUD customers will have to pay more, but it's worth it for some vague notion of extending the life of the landfill 70 to 100 years from now. After hearing from thousands of our customers in recent months, I can assure you they are in no mood to pay a disproportionate share of the cost for this ill-conceived project. As unpleasant as all of this may be, we're going to continue to advocate for our customers, who are also your constituents, as you well know. We encourage you to listen to them and to take seriously their concerns about affordability. We all love living here in Lane County, but with costs rising like few other places in the country, the reality is we are on the verge of pricing people out. Please think twice before making this situation worse by pushing this wholly unnecessary iMurph or Clean Lane project. It's not too late. We stand ready to help you shift course while still meeting your climate goals. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Next, I'll welcome Andy O'Brown to the podium.
Good morning. My name is Andy L. Brown. I am the Managing Director for the Eugene Springfield NAACP. I'm here to speak to you this morning about the Across the Bridge community, which I'm sure all of you are very familiar with at this point. Today marks 75 years of a decree that was sent out from the county that the inhabitants of that community must vacate the premises for expansion, namely a new bridge, and the implementation of this decree was then set into motion in action August 24th, 75 years ago. I'm here to talk to you today about a press conference that we are having at the Mims House at 330 High Street, Monday, July 22nd. Monday, July 22nd at 9 a.m. to bring more awareness and public awareness to the community and to the state at large, and give you all an opportunity to come and make your presence known and to speak to what has transpired there and to speak to the county's involvement in it, the county in which you all represent currently. Now, even though none of us were present at the time, we all have to really take account to the impact that it had to the families, to who were there at the time, and the offspring who are currently living, many of them, some of the elders who were living at the time, and their children, their grandchildren. My hope is that everyone here would be able to make their presence known at this press conference and give a statement. We have commitment from many other elected officials locally and statewide who will be there and who will, if they cannot be there, who will submit a written statement that will be read publicly. and I really hope to see you all there. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. That's everyone who has signed up in Harris Hall, although I will check back to see if anyone who arrived late still wishes to speak. But first, I'll turn it over to Tanya to manage the online queue if there's anyone signed up to give remote testimony this morning.
Thank you, Chair. If you are online and would like to give public testimony for the July 16th Board of County Commissioners meeting, please raise your virtual hand. I do not see any virtual hands raised, so we will return the meeting back to you.
Thank you, Tanya. Is there anyone else in Harris Hall who wishes to speak before the board this morning? Seeing none, I will conclude the public comment portion of our agenda and move us along to Commissioners' response to public comment and/or other issues or remonstrance to the board. Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Chair Trigger. A couple of things this morning. First off, if you look out the back window, you'll see Lane County Farmers Market every Tuesday. A great place to buy fresh produce, and this time of the year, more and more locally grown produce is being presented to us over there. I went over there last week, and I couldn't stop buying. I mean, there's so much stuff. So please pay a visit. Mr. Lieberman, thanks for your testimony today. Just a reminder that Homes for Good is not a Lane County agency. Homes for Good has a separate board of directors and is not a Lane County agency. So the board of directors, the board of county commissioners has no impact or authority over the Homes for Good actions or their board or their staff. And just a quick agreement with Charles C. Kaler has left, but agreement on one thing. Elected officials should not be choosing redistricting committees. I agree with that. Thank you.
Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, hey, thanks for coming out again. It's really great, obviously, to see people doing public testimony and airing their grievances in front of government. That's your constitutional right, and I applaud you for that. Thank you for coming. Darvin, interesting invitation. Haven't seen one of those before, but it's an interesting conversation to have about investing county funds locally in a local bank. That's the second largest bank in the state. I remember when you first started. I think I photographed many of your first headshots, so it has some good fond memories for me. And as for Keith, you know, ongoing LMD problems, we're still facing those, and we're in your court. We're going to be fighting for you as well. And for the IMRF folks, yeah, I know that's a hot topic. We're getting a lot of emails on that, and there's a lot of discord going on, and positive, negative, and we're plowing through all of that. And for the most part, I think there is elements of that project that still bother me and still don't pencil out. So I'll let you know that I'm on the side of trying to get to the bottom of all this. But I think also, too, I want to make a statement from my own personal perspective about the events of the past weekend, and I want to say that they remind us nationally and locally that the summation of words matter, and the use of violence on any level is unacceptable. Lane County Board of Commissioners do not condone any form of hate, bias, or the use of violence to make a political point or to use as a weapon of influence. The Washington Post said on Sunday, the darkest hours of American history, the ones overshadowed by political violence, remind us that incitement and hatred must be constantly challenged. So I would like to say on behalf of myself and any board member that would agree with me that we want to express our sincere sorrow over the recent events to the innocent victims and their families, but also to take this chance to renew our commitment to ensuring the peaceful continuance of a diverse, fair political system. This will only continue when elected officials bear constant vigilance to challenging those seeds of volatility that may take root in the soil of diverse perspectives. By this firm stewardship and attention, we are committed as a board to bringing the nation together by first putting these values as a pillar into our own local community. And we will do this first and foremost as your elected officials. Thank you, Chair.
Commissioner Senega.
Yes, we'll start with the IMRF. Those are 40,000 residents that are going to see 2 rate increases, as we've talked about multiple times. One, energy, second, garbage. And one thing that I don't think everybody understands, and nor should they, is how power works, right? Power comes through a grid and passes on. You can't store energy. So although those generators that EPUD is currently operating might not produce a lot of power, they knock down the spikes. So when power is most expensive, you run those generators and you knock down those spikes. So it's not a lot of power they produce, but it's expensive power they produce. That's just, that's just something that we should think about when we're considering the lack of methane that they will soon be noticing. We could go on and on about it, but that's just one point that I would really like to drive home, is it's not a lot of power, but it's the expensive power. You're listening to the news, and there's been statements out that we are looking at rolling brownouts in 2027. I've been saying this for years. EVs, people having more air conditioners, and just more people. We're not producing any more power, but we're using more. So these are all things we need to consider. Keith Basket, thanks for coming. There's that 5-day deadline really hits, and it does make you question if that's something that would be allowed for someone that's putting forth a permit versus someone that is stopping a permit. So that's something that we really should look into. And in order to get your case seen here, our land management division manager has to put forth that case. So then it comes to us and we can see it. So that's something to keep in mind. We don't get to pick what cases we see. They get brought to us. Andy L. Brown, glad you came back. I was taking notes. I'll be gone on Monday on a family trip. You only have so many more summers left with the kids, and so I'm going to utilize that, but I will do what I can to make that press conference noticed, and thanks for coming and testifying today. Appreciate it.
Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate everybody coming on a Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. when a lot of people are working. I know that that's not the easiest time for you to come in and speak to us, so I appreciate it, and I appreciate the diversity of the different topics that have come before us today. I wanted to just talk about a few regarding land use specifically. I know there was somebody here, Mr. Basket from Upriver, of course the area which I represent, and there is a common misconception that the Board of County Commissioners is able to make land use law. In fact, the state of Oregon and your state legislators make land use law. The county is the one that's actually dedicated to implementing land use law. And that can often get confused because when somebody has an issue with land use or development in the county, they often come straight to the county to say, you're doing it wrong. When in fact, we are required to follow state land use law. And that can be exceptionally challenging. There are very few ways in which the Board of County Commissioners can actually alter state land use law. It's extremely limited. And unfortunately, once it's gone through a judicial process, there's very little that the Board of County Commissioners can do at that point. But if there is an application just going in and you want to make us aware of it, specifically me and the district that which I represent, I'm happy to talk about it with you. Happy to be CC'd on the communications and follow up on that as needed. I've been doing that for all the time that I've been on the board, and it's actually something that the rural commissioners do on a regular basis. So I'm happy to continue to provide that service. I know we have had several conversations with people coming up and speaking about the IMER project, specifically from EPUD. I, of course, thank you for coming again and listen to the customers that are writing in. I am a staunch supporter of the Clean Lane project. It has a lot of really wonderful benefits for the community. I continue to have that position. It doesn't mean that I don't believe that there are concerns from customers, which I will absolutely be open to hearing about. But the benefits of the Clean Lane project are outstanding for our community, and that is the reason which I continue to support that project. I just want to make that perfectly clear to the community and anybody that's listening, and to the EPUD Board of Directors who probably already know that. But it's important that the community knows that as well. Andy, thank you for coming. I was not aware of the presser that you're having on Monday, so it's wonderful that you're able to let us know. I will make every effort to be there, and I'll put it on my calendar now. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Well, I'll follow on by addressing Mr. Brown. Thank you so much for coming. I have some prepared remarks noting the anniversary because it is an important date, and our board meeting falls exactly on the date. And so I do want to read those brief remarks just to note this, the history, but very much appreciate and I'm grateful that a member of the Black community would come and present that to us. That is as and more important than anything any one of us up here could put out to the public. So thank you for taking the time to come and note that. As Mr. Brown stated, 75 years ago, on July 16th, 1949, Lane County obtained a court order demanding specific areas in the neighborhood, currently known as Across the Bridge, to be vacated within 10 days of that notice. The court order required the raising of a small number of homes in an area delineated by certain riverfront streets to make way for construction of a new Ferry Street Bridge. These were the homes of Black families who had created a strong, supportive community there. On August 24th, 1949, a bulldozer entered the neighborhood, the Ferry Street Village, and razed all of the homes in the area, as well as the neighborhood church. Although many of the dozens of residents were prepared, many escaped with only the possessions they were able to rescue in a few minutes. Most of the residents were displaced to 3 new sites in the boundaries of the city of Eugene, where there was often no water, electricity, or sanitary services. I'm pleased that you brought to the board's attention the event on the 22nd. I had already been aware of that and planned to attend. And community partners have been working, including alongside Lane County and City of Eugene staff, to organize a gathering later this year in addition, to bring community together to mark this event and to specifically honor the living descendants of these displaced families. So again, thank you so much for taking time to come to us, and more to come on that. The other thing I would like to mention this morning, in sort of stark contrast, we just discussed a government action to destroy a community, and I had the distinct privilege and honor and joy of touring the rebuilding of a community that was devastated by wildfire last Thursday. I know some of you have attended. There's been a series of these rebuilding tours up in the community of Blue River in Commissioner Buck's district that was so devastated by the Holiday Farm fire coming up on 4 years ago. And I just want to thank the organizers of that tour, our staff. There were many folks from Lane County there. It is continues to be heartbreaking, but also so inspiring and encouraging to see the efforts of that community as they rebuild and the way that they are all working together to create a vision for what that community will look like moving forward. So it's just tremendous to see the progress and to meet so many of the residents up in Blue River. And so again, I just want to acknowledge all of their hard work and thank the staff that are working so hard to support that community. Thank you all.
Chair Trigger.
Commissioner Farr.
And I apologize, but I buried my lead, and I'm going to ask for a little bit of lenience on this. There was a wildfire in northwest Eugene yesterday, a very large one out on off Bodenheimer Road, about a little over half a mile from where I live. I saw the smoke. I observed the fire as it progressed. It was in hay fields. Today I toured the area, and I saw the actual genesis where the fire fanned out from a single point. Hard to say what caused it, but what I wanted to mention was that about halfway through the conflagration, the Eugene Fire Department called all off-duty personnel to duty to fight the fire. It was raging. It was moving very, very fast, and while it was contained ultimately by the A2 channel, which is a channel that runs from Amazon Creek to Fern Ridge, it was many homes, even lives were in danger. I want to thank the Eugene Springfield Fire Department in particular for their call to action yesterday. Outside of the urban growth boundary, their call to action yesterday was tremendous. The people out there were relieved when the fire was put out, and Prairie Mountain School, which is about a quarter of a mile from where I live, was the rallying point for the people who were evacuated from their homes. We had a stage 3, evacuate now, leave, grab your pets if you can, type of emergency. But once again, Chair, thank you for indulging me in this, but thank you to the Eugene Springfield firefighters and to everybody who helped contain that fire.
Thank you, Commissioner Farr. With that, we will move on to item 5 on our agenda, which is the consent calendar. All items here are considered to be routine. If any commissioner wanted to discuss an item, they would have pulled it to be considered in a single motion. And all the materials that are presented to us in passing the consent calendar or considering the consent calendar for passage are available online. With that, I'll look for a motion.
Chair, I'm ready. I'd like to move to appoint and approve and adopt the consent calendar for Tuesday, July 16th, 2024.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. It's been moved by Vice Chair and seconded by Commissioner Buck to approve the consent calendar for Tuesday, July 16th. All those in favor, please signify with an aye. 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 Motion carries 5-0. Thank you all. Moving along. Item 6, County Administration has several items before us. The first is a report on elections work. And is the clerk joining us? Do we need to? Virtually. Great. Thank you so much. We have our clerk, Lane County Clerk Dina Dawson, joining us. There she is. Good morning. I'll turn it over to our administrator if he wants to introduce the item, or are we going directly to the clerk?
I think we go right to Dina.
Great. Thank you. Good morning, Dina. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. I'm pleased to be here. Chair Trieger and Board of Commissioners, it feels odd to be over here in the office today, but today is the first day that we're picking up and collecting ballots for the recall election for Cottage Grove. And we also have some office work reconfiguration going on in the front office. So lots going on, and I appreciate the time to share a couple of updates. Very, very, very thrilled that we have had successful recruitments for our supervisor position and our manager position. Pamela Nevin was hired as our supervisor, and she is going to be taking the first year and focusing on helping us rebuild our recording division. As everyone recalls, the recording division moved in with the election division last year. We're all living here in the same place together and working to cross-train and just really build up that program. So Pamela is going to be a really great asset for us. On the election side, I feel like we got a unicorn. We are happy to have Richard Barron starting with us on July 22nd. Mr. Barron brings over 23 years of elections experience. I think the last 9 of it was as executive director in Fulton County, Georgia, so experience with an electorate 850,000 voters. Although not specific vote by mail experience, the combination of my experience and his experience together is going to be an instant injection of relief for me and for our team. So I'm really thrilled about that. We've got a couple vacancies that's been consistent throughout my 2 years here, which I think in 2 days I will have been here for 2 years. So wanted to provide a quick update from the primary election. We're 56 days past that now. We ended up with about 36% turnout. I wanted to highlight some of the signature challenges and the CURE data. The dashboard showed that there were 230 ballots returned without signatures, and 102 of those folks actually submitted sufficient evidence and had those challenges cured. And for the signature discrepancies, we had over 600 folks that had a challenged signature, and about 260 of those folks cured those signatures. I'm really expecting to have a lot more participation in the presidential election, so those numbers are going to be much more significant, and it'll be really exciting to watch the CURE process and how those numbers change on the dashboards. An interesting piece from the May primary election is that we had a recount because of a tie for State Representative District 8 position. But there was no candidate that filed for that position, so the tie was due to the top 2 write-ins, and both of those write-ins received only 7 votes. So we quickly had to pull a team together and do a hand count of over 4,000 ballots. And those are a great opportunity to highlight accuracy in elections because we ended up with zero discrepancies. We pulled in a team of election workers. They went through and hand counted every single ballot for that race, and we ended up with the same exact result. So I'm really proud of the efforts that we put into our determination of voter intent and how we were able to accurately reproduce those results. So we're open to the public if they're interested to come and observe those things, and it's something I'm really proud of. For the recall election, we are 2 weeks out. Cottage Grove, 3 councilors, considered a small election, 7,500 voters, just one ballot style that was created. Because there's only a short 35-day window, we mail all of the ballots basically out at the same time. We've just got the Cottage Grove box open and the box here at the elections office open. The typical thing you can expect from the elections department is that we have the tentative schedule of events, the results schedule, other important dates and information are available on the landing page on the website. And so we're really trying to build that consistency so folks know what they can expect for us. We are 112 days away from the presidential election. So we have the elections landing page for the presidential election. Special district candidate filing begins this week. We're only 32 days away from the deadline for folks to refer prepared ballot titles or text for the challenge period. And that means we're going to be creating and proofing ballots in just 52 days. So we're being as diligent as ever to make sure that we are prepared. I wanted to provide a brief update on the I Voted coloring page contest. I really appreciate all the support and the ideas that we get when we're providing these updates. At this time, we still have one submission. We've expanded our outreach to Food for Lane County and have provided printed entry forms for them to be able to provide. We have reached out to local rec centers to see if they can provide those forms. But as we're about 2 weeks away from the entry period ending, the team and I are working on a backup plan to be able to move forward with that in a different way if necessary. So I'll be glad to come back and provide an update at the next time that I'm able to be in front of you. And I just wanted to, I did not agendize this, but I wanted to provide an election security update. Even before the events that occurred on Saturday, political violence and election security are basically top of mind for me all the time. And I just wanted to address some of the ways that we continue, to address the situation. We're working with facilities now to improve security for staff and for the public here at the elections office. Right now, I'm working with TS, IS, Emergency Management, and the policy team to apply for a grant that would allow us to place cameras at select drop boxes before the general election. Devin, the PIO, and I continue to work on a plan to flood social media with accurate and educational information. And I'm really pleased to announce that Tiffany Brown, Emergency Manager, and I have been brainstorming, and the Office of Emergency Management and Elections are going to be co-hosting a tabletop training exercise, or for the election nerds in the group, we'll call it a TTX. That event will be for our local, state, and federal public safety partners this fall. And for those that aren't familiar with the TTX, it's basically a role-playing exercise where participants will respond in real time to a scenario. And these exercises really help illuminate gaps in our processes and potentially our public safety partners' process, help us to get to know each other better, how we can work together. And it allows us and our public safety partners to better prepare for the unexpected and to identify any gaps. So in light of the world that we live in and political violence and election security, we're continuing to try to do better. So thank you so much for your time today and for letting me give this update.
Thank you so much. I'm glad you added that last bit. I'm sorry that you have to, but I'm really glad you did and that we're doing such a great job. With that, I'll turn it over to the board for any questions or comments. I will ask a question since no one's raising their hand. With the ballot curing, I assume the discrepancy between ballots, whether they were, for whatever reason, they might have been rejected, that number and the number that were actually cured, that discrepancy is because people didn't follow up to get their ballot cured, or have there been some where the discrepancy couldn't be reconciled, like with signatures or what have you?
Yeah, there's actually a very small number of what we call a rejected cure. And that information is actually available on the dashboards as well, because I want to be able to be as transparent as possible. So yes, the vast majorities are a signature discrepancy where the signature doesn't match. Some people just forget to sign their return ballot envelope, and for the folks that failed to cure, they didn't respond to the cure letter, they didn't provide sufficient evidence. The statistics for those are available on the dashboard.
Great, thank you so much.
Welcome.
Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Chair Trieger. Thanks for a great presentation. I love hearing you talk about elections. I find out something new every single time. And the thing that you really focus on is the security and the confidence that you personally have, and you instill that confidence in me. When you talk about a recount that came out exactly the same as the original count, that is an illustration of really how the system does operate as it is intended to operate. And thank you for the professionalism that you bring to the work and the new bar that you have established for the way we conduct elections in Lane County. We all appreciate that. I have a question specifically about the Cottage Grove recall. I'm paying close attention to that. We all should. You mentioned that the ballots were mailed today. Could you go through the process, and when is the deadline for return on ballots?
Yeah, absolutely. The Cottage Grove recall date is July 30th. And so the deadline to return ballots is either postmarked by July 30th or at the Cottage Grove Dropbox by 8 p.m. on 2 weeks from today, or the elections Dropbox or here at the election office. Because it's a recall election, we have 35 days from the day that the candidates do not resign to pull it all together. So ballots were mailed to voters on July 11. That was just 5 days ago. And we've posted it on social media, again, working with Devin to make sure that we're providing information that is helpful and educational and useful for our followers. So, yep, there's 2 weeks left for folks. Really hoping for a high turnout. 7,513 voters in Cottage Grove that should have received a ballot. Just for voters in the city limits of Cottage Grove in the district. If folks in that area have not received a ballot yet, contact our office right away and we'll get you a replacement.
Well, thank you for the details on that. You say 7,513 registered voters in that district.
Yes.
And I was going to ask you a question. I hate speculation. It's not something I like to engage in speculation regarding, but I was going to ask you what you expect the turnout to be. You said high. That's all I need. You don't need to speculate beyond that.
Let me clarify. I am hoping for high, but I am expecting low. I am going to do my best to educate folks on it and put it in social media as frequently as we can and provide good information on our website. But unfortunately, recall elections don't typically garner a lot of participation, so we're going to do our best. And, I was hoping for 45% turnout in the primary election too, and we ended up at 36. So I don't think we're going to be processing that many ballots for the recall election, but I hope I'm wrong.
Well, and I hope that we can do something to encourage people to vote, because it's very, very important. And if a few people make a big decision like that, then we're apt to get the wrong decision made. Thank you.
Welcome.
All right, seeing no other questions or comments, we'll thank you for your time and let you get back to all the work you have, and congrats on your new hires. That's great news. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right. right, our next item, item B, is a report on LRAPA, the Lane Regional Air Protection Agency, and our Policy Director, Steve Adams, is joining us this morning, along with Travis Knudsen from LRAPA. Welcome. Good morning.
Chair Trieger, Commissioners, good morning. It's a delight to be with you this morning. It's a delight to join my friend and my colleague Travis Knudsen, recently appointed Executive Director of the Lane Regional Air Protection Agency. I've had the pleasure of working with Travis before his appointment as staff, as we've partnered on a number of federal funding opportunities. He's brought a lot of enthusiasm, creativity to the partnership with county government, and of course that work has legs beyond. So Travis has been a tremendous public servant. It's my pleasure to introduce Travis for his presentation and update to the board.
Thank you, Steve. Hello, Commissioner Traeger, members of the board. My name is Travis Knudsen, the Executive Director for the Lane Regional Air Protection Agency, and I'm appreciative and grateful for the opportunity to come here to talk a little bit about LRAPA, our role in Lane County, and how we can be a service to the county, and look forward to describing more. A bit about myself before I guess I get totally into it. So I was the Public Affairs Manager for the Lane Regional Air Protection Agency, began there in March of 2020. I'll say that one of the most challenging things thus far, and I'm sure there's more to come, that has been of my professional career, was learning from government processes, government system, government management in a at-home COVID setting remotely from my computer. It was a very challenging year. My time at LRAPA has certainly been an intense amount of growth, personally and professionally for myself, and I imagine that will continue as I step into the role here as the Executive Director for LRAPA. So what we as an organization do here is we safeguard air quality for Lane County. We were established in 1968 and are dedicated to protecting health by improving and maintaining air quality. Our responsibilities include monitoring air quality, implementing programs such as issuing air permits to industrial sources, as well as enforcing the regulations that we have in Lane County. We operate an expanded network of monitoring across Lane County than what would otherwise be available without the presence of LRAPA. Without LRAPA, the air quality management responsibility would be held by the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality, and so our local relation here provides us more opportunity to have a more expansive monitoring network. And isn't benefit is just the local benefit, I like to call it. We're able to have more relationships, more direct relationships with a number of stakeholders who are not just across the entire state of Oregon, but specifically right here in Lane County. So a little bit of a Clean Air Act lesson here. So LRAPA's role under the Clean Air Act begins with the federal level, which the Environmental Protection Agency issued United States Code 42, Chapter 85 is where the Clean Air Act sits. And that's essentially the federal regulations that are set nationwide. That authority gets passed down once more to the state level, where the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality holds that. The state can add their own state-level regulations, which in Oregon, DEQ has done that, specifically through a program called Cleaner Air Oregon. And that authority is then passed down one more time to the county level, which is what LRAPA holds. So we essentially implement the Clean Air Act here in Lane County. And an important note is that each layer you can have an increase in stringency to your rules, but you cannot be any less stringent. And I would say LRAPA works very closely with DEQ to make sure that our rules are at the same level in stringency as DEQ. So one of the items that LRAPA does is a service we provide to our industrial sources is an increased opportunity to have relationships with them to help them understand the complicated and oftentimes changing and updating rules here in the state through the implementation of Clean Air Oregon, which is a health-based risk assessment air permitting program. What you see there on the chart is our permitting backlog. The EPA strongly recommends that you keep that below 20%, and so our federal backlog is just about 7%, and the state level permits are just under 10%, which I have to thank our operation department, Max Heffley, and his team for making sure those numbers are where they're at. On air quality complaints and enforcements, this is one of the larger services that LRAPA provides to Lane County. In 2023, we received 553 air quality complaints to us. We typically get about 250 outdoor burning complaints. That's more in the county area where people are managing their overgrowth, and burning it is one of the ways to do that. So we set the regulations and the rules to make sure that if people are burning, that smoke lifts high into the air where it won't bother people and it doesn't stay trapped at the surface of the earth. We also issue enforcement penalties. In 2024, we assessed, fiscal year 2024, 21,000 fiscal penalties. Of that, about 66% of that was within the city limits of Eugene, 28% in Springfield, and then about 6% of that is Lane County. And actually we have not yet put in the mail yet, so I have that check right here, which I'll need to leave that behind with me, but that's here to present today as well.
Someone pays us.
So how those complaints break down, this is a map that you see of about all of the complaints across the county. We have 2 field officers, so 2 folks to respond to all of these complaints countywide, with a little bit of a description of each of the markers, the colors, and about how those break down. I have a more zoomed in version of the Eugene-Springfield metro area, so you can see, essentially try to get a sense of our jurisdiction and how we are all around the region responding to our air quality complaints. And we'll make note and mention too that this responsiveness involves a callback with those who are issuing the air quality complaints to understand their concerns and then provide them what resolution we were unable to have and why. And is a service that I think is greater than what would take place outside of Lane County. I mentioned earlier we have greater monitoring across Lane County. The the regulatory grade monitors that we have there are listed on that map. The things that we look for specifically is particulate matter 10 and particulate matter 2.5. The number there just signifies how big or small that particle is. We also monitor for surface ozone as well as for hazardous air pollutants across the state. And in addition to that, we have installed over 100 purple air sensors across the county, and these are commercial grade, significantly more affordable air monitoring, not good enough to where you can turn to the EPA and say, hey, we're meeting the government standards, but good enough that the public can have a better understanding of, it's smoky outside, is it okay for me to go outside, or is it better for me to stay indoors and help to protect my health and avoid that exposure? I wanted to, of course, show a graph here, but every graph needs to be explained. So you see the red line there on the top, that is the National Ambient Air Quality Standards. That is the federal government's line that they draw for us. All of the colors there are listed, and the cities regionally are in the decline, and we're pleased with that. That demonstrates our efforts and the success that LRAPA is seeing in our programs in improving air quality. However, as the graph notes, that this data is excluding wildfire data. But if you account for that wildfire data and you put that in, you can see the dramatic impact that it has on our PM2.5. So notably, if we're able to account for more of the directly anthropogenic, although I think wildfires you could argue is an anthropogenic cause, but the direct point sources that we regulate, we're seeing dramatic increase in our air quality improvements. But with that wildfire data, a bit of a counterpoint can also be made. So one of the things that LRAPA does is we bring regional investments in air quality here to Lane County. So this is a number of the grants that we have received over the years that we're still working on and still implementing. A lot of this up in the Oak Ridge area where historically they were above that red line, the National Ambient Air Quality Standards, and was a focus of our work. So we received a targeted airshed grant for just under $5 million just before 2020 and 2019. We received a second targeted airshed grant also for the Oak Ridge West for Air area in 2022, heading into 2023 for 2.7. These are essentially wood stove changeout programs, but a component to it also includes the installation of a ductless heat pump as well as small home weatherization. And that program is up and running at this point, and it's, I would say, kind of a well-oiled machine at this place. And we have until 2028 before these funds need to be spent in the Oak Ridge region. And what's still getting established and set up as we speak is a environmental justice government-to-government grant. This has the same flavor as the targeted airshed grants in the sense that we can still do some small home repair, install some ductless heat pump. There's also a bit more of a wildfire component, which allows us to do some mitigation of fuels, specifically directly within the city limits of Oak Ridge, to increase the resiliency of the community. And then always forward-looking as well. I think one of the opportunities that ORAPA presents is a way to be collaborative with our partners and look at where funding exists and how we can be supportive in helping to bring that funding to Lane County. And just to note that the dollars here are not included in our general fund, and these are all pass-through dollars. Another point that I'd like to make is sort of the component of support from our local partners. So for fiscal year 25, between Springfield, Cottage Grove, Oak Ridge, Eugene, and Lane County government, $200,500 is the local support for us. And this is very important because there's an item called maintenance of effort. And essentially what that is, that's where the federal government, where the EPA, they look at our information, our financial data, and make sure that we are continuing to see that support from our county partners. And it has to be the same plus $1, essentially. And as long as we're able to check that box, then we continue to receive federal non-competitive grant support for maintaining that maintenance of effort. And this is where our local partners are very important because that extra support is about $350,000 to our general fund that is non-competitive grants. And why I'm so appreciative of Lane County and all of our partners in helping LRAPA do the good work that we do here in Lane County. So that was the presentation. I appreciate the opportunity to come and share a little about the organization, and I'm happy to take any questions or comments.
Thank you. To the board. Vice Chair?
Yeah, Travis, thank you for such a great presentation. I happen to be on that board, so we meet regularly in that little office that you're going to remodel. And welcome to Harris Hall. We understand, too, that you're going to get a nice space down below in the basement for a while during that transition, so we're happy to have you under the same roof. And I also got to say, this is one of those great things where the slides are probably one of the most impressive, cool, moving slides we've had in quite some time, and it obviously shows your age, so I appreciate that, too, about you as well. But I think the other thing, too, that I want to just curiosity factor is the $21,000 that you're awarding us, which thank you very much. Nobody usually pays us in these meetings. But I'm wondering, is that the total sum of all of the fines in Lane County, or does some of those get disseminated back into the places where the violations occurred somehow, or do we just steward that as Lane County?
Oregon ORS requires that our enforcement penalties go to the treasury of the local county, and so this check of $21,000 is that entire fiscal year enforcement dollars. So that's provided to Lane County, and then what happens with that beyond it is not my insight to be able to share or know.
Awesome. Great. And I would assume if we were going to try to divvy that up based on fine and violation areas, we'd spend more than $20,000 in staff time just to do that. So I think that's probably a good use of the funds. So thank you very much for your presentation. It was awesome. Thank you.
Commissioner Buck?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for coming, and congratulations on your new role.
Thank you.
I know we've run into each other on various likely wildfire events where you were out talking to the public quite a bit. I appreciate all that you've done in that regard, and look forward to working with you in your new role. Clearly, I've known a lot of the programs that LRAPA does through the Oak Ridge area of the area, which I represent, and that has been a tremendous help. But the resources are always never enough, and there's always more need up there in the surrounding areas. And people move and new people are there and they don't have the same filters or AC units or the other supplies that you've been able to funnel through. So it's a constant churning and delivery of those things. So I hope we can continue getting more and more of those grants through your organization. I don't really see that ending at some point. Like, everybody's got what they need. It will just never happen that way. So it's a constant need up there. I often get, I think, as your statistics show, the most common complaints I get regarding air quality are generally residential or commercial burn piles, which you showed is the majority of your calls in general. People are frustrated that it's not limited. Generally, it comes from people who have asthma or some other health effect from them. Otherwise, they wouldn't notice it and don't necessarily call. And sometimes it's very confusing for the public to know who to call. I do almost always, refer them to LRAPA first, although I'm not sure that you do the commercial side of things. And the enforcement mechanism, I know you try to use education mostly, but oftentimes people get a little frustrated that there's no real, enforcement behind it. It's good that there are some fines. I didn't actually realize we got the fines through LRAPA. That's news to me. And not that it's not that much. I just wonder if it's enough to really enforce the rules.
Yes, Commissioner Butch, I appreciate your comments and certainly agree that one of the common challenges, particularly in the rural parts of the county, when you get more into town, a lot of times those air quality complaints can be, I noticed this weird odor, there may be some industrial, source close to me that I have concerns about, and that's what I'm interested in. But in the rural parts of county, very much outdoor burning. On the commercial side of it, that is regulated by the Oregon Department of Forestry, so we refer those complaints to that direction. But for residential outdoor burning, our approach is we respond. We go and we have a conversation with the neighbor who is conducting the burn, and for one, to see if there are any rule violations, because if they are following the rules and regulations, outdoor burning is a right that rural residents have. And a lot of times that too then becomes the intermediary between neighbors and trying to come to a best path forward. And there are things that we can do that don't even go into an enforcement component. We do see that as last resort, but even items like if you have a little bit of airflow, like a leaf blower that you can point closer towards that fire to increase efficiency, it'll create less smoke. And these are some of the conversations we have with neighbors so they can understand actions they can take to reduce their impact and reduce the exposure that people are having to that smoke, as well as from a meteorological basis, setting the days when, okay, it's an okay day for that burn, or it's not an okay day because we have an inversion and that smoke's just going to stay at the surface of the earth. And another point of confusion, I agree, is also sometimes too when it's the fire authority that says the fire danger is too high and we can't allow outdoor burning. That's not LRAPA's call to make. We make the smoke call, but we of course communicate whatever those items may be. And it's just a situation of lots of different converging authorities all in the same space. And so our role as the identifiable air agency is to take those complaints, pass them along and forward them where necessary, and then respond where we are able.
Thank you. Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Chair Trigger. Hey, thanks for the presentation today. S-E-N or S-O-N on your name?
S-E-N, yes. My
S-E-N,
family's
so
a
you're
little
Danish.
different from the most of them, yeah.
I have a friend who's a Jorgensen, S-E-N. He says, I'm not Swedish, S-E-N. All that aside, a bit of history. Before you came to LRAPA, and congratulations, by the way, on moving through and becoming the executive director, we had a discussion with this Board of County Commissioners as to whether or not we needed LRAPA. This, I think, is the only regional air pollution authority in Oregon, as defined in 0060. But we had the discussion, and what was determined at the time, and it became very evident, is that Lane County is a little bit diverse in its air. We're not the only county that goes all the way from the beaches to the top of the Cascades. Douglas County also does. But we're the only county that has a large metropolitan area in the center of it. And we're the only county that, for instance, has Oak Ridge, which has its own very specialized air issues. And what we came up with at the time is that DEQ simply did not have the ability. This is a discussion that we had at the time, and I am open for correction if I'm not exactly right, but didn't have the wavelength or the broad bandwidth, whatever you may want to call it, to really cover all of the things that LRAP is able to cover in Lane County. And we unanimously supported it, and we continue to support LRAP because of the great work you do. Not just defining source pollution, not just declaring air emergencies, but also making sure that the public is fully aware of the diversity of the air in Lane County. And you do a great job. I'm not talking about anything very, very specific, but you take over from Merlin, who did a wonderful job for a lot of years. I was on the LRAPA board for about that long, and I enjoyed it. But I really want to commend you and your agency on what you do for Lane County, that Clackamas and Washington Clackamas and Washington, Multnomah County, Tillamook counties all rely on the DEQ to do all of the work. You do it in a very regionalized, very specific way that really is attuned to Lane County. Nobody else does that. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that our local partnership opportunities is a real strength of LRAPA being here in the community.
And you commend the local partnership for leveraging federal funds that help you really not just do your work, but actually enhance your work at all times.
Absolutely. Yep.
Very well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Seneca.
Thank you. Mr. Knutson, appreciate it. We coined a term during the United Front trip, Commissioner Farr. It's ski to shining sea. So when you're talking about how diverse Lane County is, it was pretty funny. So I had a question about the permitting background and requirements we went through. That I'm guessing that could be its own presentation, but just kind of high level, what do you require? What are you looking for? Is this year after year? A business changes. How does that look from LRAPA standpoint?
So a lot of times if there's a business that comes to us and oftentimes, particularly if they're a smaller business, the question is, what do we even need? And then that becomes a conversation of, well, what are you doing? Because from air regulatory perspective, it's about the threshold or about the quantity of emissions that you are creating based off the activities that you have. And then we look to the federal requirements that say, okay, if you're doing this particular process, that means that you are subject to a national emissions standard for hazardous air pollutants, or NESHAP. So that is a component of something that needs to be included in your air permit. And then at the state regulatory level, are there state requirements, specifically such as Clean Air Oregon, where we say, okay, if you're emitting this pollution in this quantity, what's the health risk to that? How far away are people from those emissions, and how much are they breathing? And what's that potential health risk? And if it's high enough, through state authority, we have the ability to require changes at the business. So it's really a conversation of what are you working on, what are your goals, and how can you navigate the complex and oftentimes changing regulatory landscape. And I think on the civil penalties, ours oftentimes are quite a bit lower than DEQ's, only in the sense, well, DEQ is statewide, of course, but I think the state perspective sometimes can be the expectation is on the business to have all of these items sorted. As where I think the LRAPA perspective is, we see it more as a communication, a relationship on what's expected, making sure all of those items are understood so that way businesses can chart the best path forward. So a long-winded answer to essentially says it depends on how much stuff you're putting in there, and that depends on what permit size you need, and each one has different regulatory requirements that go along with it. But we inspect our permits, and depending on what it is, it's going to be a 10 or a 5-year cycle, and then they come up for renewal, and you have to issue another renewal application for renewal and go through that process as well.
Excellent. That is a great answer. For what I didn't know, the permits could last that long, but it truly is a relationship, right? Because you're going off of what that business tells you, and the better your relationship and the more your stance is, we want to help, the better regulatory expectations you can have, or that they're going to bring forth. Okay, well, and I saw up there, Oak Ridge, they had a firewood program. Mm-hmm. Does any of that go towards the new wood stoves? You brought up having a blower
into a fire. And those new wood stoves are just incredible. And with the inversion they have up there, is there ever been a wood stove replacement program, if you would?
So those targeted airshed grants, the multi-million-dollar grants, is a special grant opportunity that the Oak Ridge community qualified for because they were above that red line, the National Ambient Air Quality Standards that the federal government sets. Oak Ridge was above it for a number of years, and so they qualified for this grant block, which provided significant funding to do essentially a wood stove change-out program, which has helped to reduce their emissions. A benefit to it is a greenhouse gas energy efficiency component, which is the installation of ductless heat pumps, as well as some small home repair. I really wish there was a well-identified funding stream for a wood stove change-out program that could exist elsewhere in Lane County, but for that targeted airshed grant specifically, you qualify for it if your air quality is above that red line that the EPA says you must be below. Oak Ridge is now below that line. We went through the steps to get them in non-attainment to now in maintenance with those standards, and because of that, they no longer qualify for future targeted airshed grant funding, but I'm really appreciative that flexibility or that funding exists for those communities.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Without any additional questions or comment, thank you so much for being here this morning. We really appreciate your time and the presentation.
Thank you.
Right. Next up, our policy director is staying at the table for this item and will be joined by Kristen Lee, our senior program services coordinator, to give us an update on our climate action plan. Good morning. Welcome.
Chair Trieger, commissioners, thank you so much for the opportunity to actually bundle a few presentations. So there is a bit of a theme perhaps this morning in some of the presentations. My colleague Kristen, as she is pulling up the presentation for you this morning, I really just want to provide some formative remarks. So 2 years ago, December of 2022, the board adopted, am I getting those dates right? I believe so. The board adopted the last of the three-part climate action plan for Wayne County. The third piece of three specifically was focused on resilience. And during the time in which we were finalizing about a 2 or 3 year process of creating that climate action plan, it was happening concurrently with the pandemic. We were actually constituting the policy division. We were putting the pieces together, working hard to try to achieve the county administrator's vision for what a consolidated, integrated approach to advancing major priorities within county government could look like. We certainly were recruiting for Kristen for the position, and Kristen, we were very fortunate to have Ms. Lee show interest in the position and to join us. She comes to us with over 30 years of housing policy background and extensive federal grant management experience, but she was doing unhoused policy and housing production in the Bay Area for a number of years before she came here and decided, one wicked problem for another. Let's think about what we can do on the climate front. So this has been a pragmatic approach as we began to look at what our role was specifically for addressing climate-related issues. We recognized a couple of factors. We had multiple problems that we had to fix all at once. We really had to work on housing production. We really had to work on the investment around infrastructure around the county on a wide range of areas, both physical infrastructure, wet infrastructure, as they call it, water and power. These are key issues that we're addressing our community's concerns. We needed to think about business and community development as part of those conversations, and we needed to think about wildfire and emergency management related activities. We were recovering from a major event, after all, as all of this was coming together. We had, you'll recall at the same time, a rather large federal investment from ARPA in our hands, and you will soon be receiving a briefing from our colleague Alex Dreer about the conclusion of those ARPA dollars that came to us, the American Rescue Plan Act. But in setting up the conversation for this morning, we really looked specifically at how to engage in a very practical path forward for securing funds. A lot of this is been related to partnership activities and collaboration with partners, and so we'll be speaking a great deal of that. And so with that, that kind of stage setting, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Ms. Lee.
Great, thank you. Is this, so I see it on my screen, but I don't see it up here. Morning, thank you. And my slides are really not as cool as Travis's slides. I'm sorry, but I did my best. So Steve mentioned, that we have climate action plans in 3 phases, and here they are. Phase 1 is really focused on our internal greenhouse gas emissions. Phase 2 is focused on greenhouse gas emissions throughout the community, and Phase 3 is focused on resilience. And so I'll turn it back over to Steve to talk a little bit about, the fact that we're, true to my background as well in administering federal funds and going after federal grants, we're really trying to bolster the work of achieving some of our climate action goals by tapping into this unprecedented amount of funding that's being made available through these 3 acts. Steve, do you want to talk a little?
I'm happy to do so. And so the notion that a community, a city, or a county would do a climate action plan is maybe about 20, 25 years old, this idea. And it was done in large measure to think about what one could do with one's own investments. So that's been the traditional pathway. The real notable kind of focus that happened as we concluded our climate action planning is that Congress was busy appropriating significant sums of money. So we first and foremost had the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act that was passed. It's often called the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. And that was followed by the Inflation Reduction Act, sometimes called IRA, which has a lot of tax-related provisions in it. And that was followed then by the CHIPS and Science Act, which often is looked at as mostly focused on semiconductor incentives, but it also contains a lot of federal funds specifically for targeted economic development investments for domestic production of things like solar panels, advanced battery components, as well as heat pumps. So trying to bring a lot of these technologies back to our shores for production to create the jobs benefits associated with that. So in sum, over $500 billion, and depending upon how you do the math on the tax credits and what assumptions you make in terms of what the uptake of those tax credits would be, over $1 trillion worth of investment it represented by these pieces of legislation. So regardless of what our kind of thinking was specifically locally, the money was on the table at the federal level, and the opportunity for us to capture these benefits for our community was just overwhelmingly compelling. Certainly, I think as we look back on this period of time, in 10, 20, 30 years, when we'll see a big difference between the communities that really went all in to try to secure these investments and those that did not. It will, in fact, change the trajectory, I would argue, of what those communities can look like in terms of manufacturing, in terms of jobs. It is really, certainly in my 30 years of public service, never seen anything to the extent that we're seeing right now. And so we've been fully focused on trying to maximize the number of federal notices of funding opportunity that we possibly can.
And I'll just add that another thing that the Biden administration did was issue an executive order that required that 40% of all funding in various areas related to climate and infrastructure be spent on disadvantaged communities. Those are communities that have low incomes and that are disproportionately affected by climate change. So I just wanted to highlight that. And that is a part of every grant that we write. We have to talk about how we're going to spend at least 40% of it on disadvantaged communities, which is great. So this slide is just a bit more detail about the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And you can see that a large chunk of it is focused on transportation, but also on other sectors, such as funding for broadband, funding for the power grid, water, and resiliency. And then here with
Excuse me just a second. Can you go back for just a minute?
Yep.
The screen is hiding, what does it say, Western something? And then can you also please describe what is legacy pollution?
Western water is what the screen is hiding. And legacy pollution, I believe it's related to industrial cleanups.
Thank you.
And here is a bit more detail on the Inflation Reduction Act, and just pointing out, one highlight here is those tax credits that I'll talk about a little bit more later on in the presentation. So moving right along. So staff have been really working hard to accomplish the goals contained in our Climate Action Plan Phase 1, which focuses on reducing emissions that are directly caused by our actions. Clean Lane is an example of that, and implementing Clean Lane will really reduce our emissions from the landfill, which are the largest contributor in terms of our internal greenhouse gas emissions in Lane County. Also, we've got LED lighting in county facilities. In June, the board approved $3.2 million for countywide conversion to LEDs in our facilities, and we also were able to get grant funds through the EPA and from EWEB utility incentives, totaling almost $300,000 that will support the project, and it'll be major electricity savings moving on into the future. Then we've got facility waste reduction actions, and I know that Angie and David Ward are here to talk at the next item on this issue, so I'll leave that to them, but it's all about reducing our waste and reducing costs as well. In terms of EVs, Lane County's policy is to replace fossil fuel vehicles with electric vehicles as they come to the end of their useful life. And so we now own 20 electric battery-operated vehicles and 8 plug-in hybrids, and we also own 15 charging stations with a total of 29 points. And we've secured $140,000 so far to help support that work. Sustainable procurement. Our finance division is working with a procurement advisory team to make updates to the Lane manual that will allow more flexibility and our ability to prioritize environmentally friendly purchasing. The leachate pipeline is also another action that we've taken. We applied to FEMA for $1.5 million recently to construct this leachate pipeline that would reduce the truck trips that are currently going from Short Mountain landfill to try to truck all that leachate to the waste treatment facility. And lastly, I'll talk a little bit about direct pay in the next slide. So direct pay, also known as elective pay, is one thing that the Inflation Reduction Act created. It's a new tax program whereby tax-exempt organizations, such as nonprofits, governments, state, local, tribal, we can take advantage of business tax credits, even if we don't have taxable income. So there are 12 tax credits available. The ones that we're really looking at are renewable energy generation, so such as rooftop solar or wind or microgrids, battery storage, and then electric vehicles and charging. So we are in the process of gathering information so that we can submit a 2023 tax return that includes our electric vehicle purchases in 2023, so we can get money back for those. And we're also receiving technical assistance through tax experts to help guide us through that process so that we do it right and we're not going to be caught, short-footed. And just a shout out to Greg Holmes, our finance manager, because he's very interested and supportive of this kind of work, and it helps save us money in the long run.
If I may, just, this is literally Lane County filing a tax return to the IRS. And as we have no tax burden, we get a refund so just as you would, right? So it's a rebate. But it's the IRS, so you've got to make sure you're doing it right. So that is this new program. And it's a really cool piece of innovation coming from recent federal legislation.
So we've also, our Climate Action Plan Phase 2 kind of focused on greenhouse gas emissions in the broader community and made a bunch of recommendations. And I will say that in total, in the 3 caps, there are 80 things we're supposed to be working on and doing, so we're doing our best. Staff have taken several steps to reduce waste and emissions, and I really want to shout out also the Waste Management Division in Public Works for doing a lot of work to do this. So battery recycling is one thing. I'll talk about that a little bit more in the next slide. We got $1 million grant to look at battery recycling. Composting, we got a USDA grant for $400,000 to promote the use of composting through 3 free compost giveaways. And we're also trying to create a better market for compost. Refrigerants, the Waste Management Division has created no-cost opportunities for residents to responsibly dispose of old refrigerant-containing appliances through a contract with St. Vincent de Paul, and we hope to do more on refrigerants in the future, which are, high greenhouse gas emitters. Our bicycle master plan, you all passed this plan a couple of years ago, but it focused on helping make bicycling a viable transportation option. And just the planning piece is really important so that we are poised to receive infrastructure funding in future. EV charging, I'll talk a little bit more about that in a next slide. The community's LEAP Local Energy Action Program with Oak Ridge is a really interesting opportunity. It's technical assistance that Oak Ridge is taking advantage of. We found out about it through an ODO staff member who said, hey, there are 2 places in Oregon that would be eligible for this technical assistance. And so we encouraged and helped support Oak Ridge to apply. And this assistance, they got the grant, they'll receive $50,000, and technical assistance through the National Renewable Energy Labs. To explore geothermal and microhydro energy sources for Oak Ridge. So I'm pretty excited about that. And that's just an example of highlighting kind of how we're trying to work with our other cities in the county to support them applying for their own funds and identifying other funding that might, foster our infrastructure development and greenhouse gas reductions. So speaking of collaboratives, the competitive federal funding through the IRA and IIJA is extremely competitive, and these are potentially large grants. So it's really important to create collaborations to increase our chances of success. So in May of 2023, with the help actually of Alrapa and Travis leading the charge as well, we created what's now called the Lane Regional Climate Collaborative. And so it's still in its formative phase, but the hope is that we can address common greenhouse gas reduction goals by partnering together, identifying grants that might be appropriate for our work, and also working with the state. So we've had a couple of representatives from DEQ coming to our meetings. In the very beginning of this collaborative, we were working to basically influence DEQ's application to the federal government for EPA funds through the Climate Pollution Reduction Program. And so their application indeed did reflect some of our local priorities. And they have not yet been notified as to whether or not they got that grant. We're hoping. So circling back to a couple of cool things that we've done, the Department of Energy battery grant. So you can see on this slide that batteries should not only be diverted from the landfill to capture and recycle critical materials, but they also cause fires. And so land fires have increased since 2018 in the landfill. And you may remember that Apex hauler had a garbage fire in one of its trucks due to batteries in the garbage. And so safe recycling of batteries is really important. And so the Waste Management Division staff received a Department of Energy grant just over $1 million in early 2024. And this will create a curbside battery pickup pilot, and also a partnership with Bimart to collect batteries, and we're talking lithium-ion batteries, those that are dangerous and will start fires. So Bimart would collect those at their area stores. And funds would also be used to hire a staff person and create safe battery storage. So next, is looking at EV charging through a federal grant opportunity. So in 2023, Lane County submitted a joint application with the City of Eugene for $15 million in Department of Transportation funding under the Charging and Fueling Infrastructure Community Grant Program. We applied for funding to install electric vehicle chargers in low-income disadvantaged locations in Eugene, and then also in the Highway 126 East and West and Highway 58 corridors, because those corridors were not included in the state's EV charging plan. So our round one application was rated good, qualified, but not good enough because there was intense demand for that funding. We're now working on a revised round two application with the City of Eugene again, based on feedback we got from DOT. And one hope is that we can work with Lane Community College and Lane Workforce Partnership to create a job training program because there is now going to be a demand for workers to both install and maintain the EV charging stations. Okay, so our Climate Action Plan Phase 3 is focused on creating a more resilient community. And so to that end, we have we've received a Firewise grant. So before she left, Patience Winningham secured a $500,000 state grant to assist vulnerable populations to create defensible space around their homes. Public Works also, and LCOG applied for and received a Protect grant, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in the next slide. We also applied for a resilience grant through OREM, and this is in 2023, the legislature allocated $10 million for resilience hubs for the entire state. And so our Public Health Medical Reserve Corps applied for supplies for resilience hubs that I'll also talk about in future. There's the EPA Community Change Grant that I will talk about in the next slide. The Clean Energy to Communities Technical Assistance Grant that I'll also expand on a little bit. And then lastly on this slide, not lastly, but the County Energy Resilience Grant. So this was also created in 2023 through HB 3630. The legislature allocated $50,000 to each county in Oregon to develop energy resilience plans. So we will be applying for that in the fall. And then our public health emergency preparedness and environmental health staff implemented resiliency workshops, and that was in the spring in Cottage Grove. And they are also working public health, emergency preparedness, and environmental health, have a Climate Corps Fellow through the Environmental Defense Fund to do outreach along the Highway 36 corridor to support our development of resilience hubs. So I'll talk a lot more about resilience hubs in a minute. So just to expand a little bit on the PROTECT grant, that was an application that was done jointly with LCOG, and we were awarded $5.4 million from this grant. And so it will support a vulnerability assessment of our surface transportation network, planning for and designating emergency transportation routes, bringing top prioritized transportation projects to 30% design, creating a resilience data visualizer tool, and developing a resilience improvement plan for our transportation infrastructure. And is it true this is the largest planning grant that was awarded in the nation under this funding source?
It is, and the 30% design is critical in that puts us in position to apply more competitively for future federal grants for out of the planning pot but into the actual implementation pots.
So resilience hubs, here we go. In March, we applied to the EPA under the Community Change Grant opportunity for almost $20 million to support the development of a network of resilience hubs across Lane County. Resilience hubs are trusted locations where the community receives services during blue sky days, non-emergency days, but they can transform into daytime and nighttime shelter during severe weather or disasters. So EPA funds would be used to upgrade facilities in Springfield, Eugene, in the Bethel area, Cottage Grove, Oak Ridge, Veneta, and Florence. And those are the black little houses on the map. And these are pilot locations, and it is our hope that not only do we have those pilot locations, but also other locations that could also be used as resilience hubs. And there are a couple of places that already identify themselves as resilience hubs, like Lane Community College and Mackenzie School, shown in yellow on the map. And this grant is a partnership that we are entering into with United Way. And so United Way, Public Health, and Emergency Management will work together to support the resilience hubs through training, education, volunteer development, and it is our hope that we create a connected system of hubs. Okay, so, and then on to energy resilience. As you can see from the service area map, and as you well know, Lane County has seven different electrical utilities. So staff convened almost all of them in May, which might be to see which ones might be interested in partnering with Lane County on applying to the Department of Energy and the National Renewable Energy Labs to support the resilience and reliability of our electrical grid. So SUB and EPUD did agree to be co-applicants, and other energy utilities provided support letters for this technical assistance opportunity. That grant, which is called Clean Energy to Communities, would provide $500,000 in a cash award, but also technical assistance evaluated at over $3.6 million from the national labs to accelerate renewable energy strategies, grid modernization technologies to improve our reliability and resilience. And so, I don't know, Steve, if you had anything to add here, but...
No, we're awaiting words breathless, but this was really inspired by the ice storm and some of the challenges that we saw working across many of our public power providers who really, we saw 3 years worth of inventory being used in many cases in just a few weeks to just try to get power back up. So a collective action effort.
So the slide just provides an overview of the grants we've applied for, and so we've requested about $68 million in grants, and so far we've received about $8.6 million. And just looking ahead, there are a couple of things we're looking at. The Climate Protection Program, which is caps on greenhouse gas emissions from fossil fuels such as natural gas and propane and gasoline. This may also result in funding in future for other activities related to our climate action plan goals. Also, the Inflation Reduction Act created a National Clean Investment Fund, and that is $14 billion that is going to be directed to smaller organizations that will use those funds to lure private investment in green infrastructure through, what are they called? CDFIs, Community Development Financial Institutions. And so it's our hope that we can, tap into some of that funding and that kind of combines our climate action strategies with economic development strategies. And then, of course, continued collaboration so that we can continue to work together. So thank you. That's it.
All right, Chair Trigger, Commissioners, I think that's our presentation. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much. So much great work. Very exciting to the board. Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. I'm thrilled of all the work that's being done. It's super exciting. And thank you for coming to Lane County to do this work. It's really great work. And to be awarded so much already is wonderful. And there's a few questions I had specifically, and I can go on a second round if necessary. The first one is about monitoring Lane County's greenhouse gas emissions. We did in the phase one really get into the nitty gritty of what our numbers were, and of course, data analytics is a big deal around here, and if you don't measure it, you're not necessarily going to fix it. And so my question is, what do we continue to monitor those numbers, and how do we do that? Do other areas in Oregon do that? And it's so that we can continually keep, if we don't know the numbers, that we won't continually keep this at top of mind. And this is such a big issue. So that's my first question.
So, Chair Trigger, Commissioner, I'm happy to answer that. We did do extensive analysis both internally and then externally. There are periodic updates currently happening at the statewide level. We have not focused on that internally in the last couple of years because I could basically invest the time and resources to go do that analysis when we probably haven't seen specific investments here locally that would have a material impact, or I could focus that staff time on securing these federal funds. And it's been my estimation, I think, our judgment that really and truly we should focus time there. So we'll come back to the analysis at some point down the road.
That would be great. I know that a lot of the work that the grants are trying to invest in, including Clean Lane, will eventually change our numbers, in which case it will be a really great idea to be able to update those numbers to show impact of the work that we're doing, as well as just the public being aware that this is being monitored. And we know about it, and we're working on it. But I understand the limited resources in the middle. The other item I'm just really excited about is, and crossing my fingers for, is those resilient hubs. The $20 million grant would be a game changer all around the county for resilient hubs, especially in light of our wildfire needs. But for any disaster of any kind, they're crucial to keeping people alive and safe and fed and warm. So I can't wait to hear. I hope it's good news, but you never know. I hear you that these are really competitive, but I know that we have the staff that have the skill set to be really effective in the grant writing, and I couldn't. I wouldn't be more thrilled if I saw that come through, because I know how much that means to the communities in the East Lane District. What is a data visualizer tool? I'm very curious.
That's a good question that I don't know the answer to. And so, I'll have to get back to you on what that is. I know that it was Brendan Ersfeld's, it was something that he contributed to the Protect grant. And so, yeah, I'm sorry. I'll have to get back to you.
I think it's a dashboard.
A dashboard. And
That's what it is.
I asked because it kind of ties to my first question of a dashboard of how we can, will we be able to visualize the different kinds of climate issues and what we're doing? I'd love to know more, and even if it's just a short email about what that possibly could be, because I think it's really important that the public knows and can see, very much like we deal with our affordable housing issues. Everybody can go up there and see what's going on, what's being produced, and something similar to our work on climate change, I think would go a long way with the public. And I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Other commissioners? Commissioner Senega.
Yeah, real quick. I'd like to reiterate the resilience. That is really exciting. I've spoke with the Florence community a lot of times, and that is the spot they're looking for. They're talking about some more seismic resilience and other things that they're really excited for. So appreciate all that hard work. You mentioned disadvantaged communities. What kind of scale is that on? I mean, we heard earlier we're 10th most expensive community to live in, and 36 as far as income. So is that a national scale, a regional scale? What's that look like?
Yeah. The federal government has created interesting tools that we use specifically for these grants. And one thing that kind of rises to the top is you can see where each particular census tract compares in terms of both the state and the federal government. So one of those data points is asthma, for example. So asthma in a variety of census tracts in Lane County is higher than 95% of other places in the nation. So that's one thing that actually, causes these census tracts to be identified as disadvantaged. And poverty, overall, I think our poverty rate in Lane County is slightly higher than the national average. So this data tool that is available to us can tell you by each census tract what those numbers are. And I'd be happy to, have you look at it. It's interesting. Yeah.
That was exactly my question is where that goes. And this is a slightly different question, but I was thinking on my way to Florence, you see the BPA lines going up over the hills. Is that part of that, the resiliency in our infrastructure, is that all part of that same program, or are they kind of on their own island, if you will?
Well, Chair Trieger, Commissioner, I think the BPA transmission would probably fall within the scope of the technical assistance. I think they would be looking at those assets. We would have to engage BPA to participate with us in that process if we got it. I suspect they would. But things like storage and other kinds of capabilities that you could build into that would be hugely beneficial, and I would think they would be interested.
Excellent, thank you.
Commissioner Farr.
Thank you. Wow, what a great presentation. Your slides are every bit as good. Very visual and really thought-provoking, but you also had some data on there that helped me to kind of look things up online. For instance, resilience hubs. There's a lot of online information about resilience hubs. So don't disdain your own slides. Are very, very good. I serve on MWMC, the Metropolitan Wastewater Management Commission, and we employ Clean Water University. Because one thing that we do with that is we invite kids in to see how we're changing this into this, how we're taking stuff that you put down your drain and put it back into the river. And it really is intriguing because kids are the greatest teachers of parents. And so, the more we can involve kids in the solutions, particularly in my experience, grade school age kids, because they're hungry for knowledge, and they're also very vocal in passing the knowledge along. So it works really well at MWMC, where we bring the kids in and show them how clean water is and also how natural gas is made from the methane emissions. So many things that we do at MWMC, we're able to move along, and grade schools bring classes to MWMC. And I'm not sure how much we've done that yet at this point, but it's something for the future, is how do we involve kids in our climate action plan? Because I don't think a lot of people know or understand the extent of the climate action plan that Lane County has. And the work that you've done on it, Kristen, I mean, it really is remarkable, the direction that we're going. Commissioner Buck mentioned $20 million in Resilience Hub grant, and I'm pretty confident, based upon what I'm hearing from you and from Steve Adams today, that we're a contender for that and we'll get it. So I'm really excited about that for the future. And I also wanted to mention that we had a wildfire out in Bethel. And something interesting, I don't know how we look at this, but I went and visited the wildfire area, and the wind was blowing pretty strong from the north, and it blew the fire downwind in a fan shape toward the A2 channel. But there's a huge BPA power line that runs diagonally right through that, and against the wind, and I'm not sure how this happened, but against the wind, the fire came back right down the power line. And if you take a look at the burn out there, it's interesting to see how that happened. I don't know how that contributes to the discussion that we're having today, but how does the generation and the transmission and the movement of electricity affect some of the things that we worry about on a regular basis? But really, the thing that I wanted to mention, two things: your slides are great, and second is let's get kids involved, because they really, I learned more from 8-year-old second grader than I learned from just about anybody else I know. So,
Do you think our battery grant for $1 million does include an educational component? And I know we talked about going to schools for exactly that reason. The kids will educate their parents. So.
And I see the Bethel Resilience Hub is at Fairfield Elementary School, which is kind of central. It's also, Fairfield is, if you look at the demographics of Fairfield, it has the highest percentage of free and reduced price lunches of all. In fact, the entire school gets it for that reason. So it's in a really good location. But yeah, I think the lithium battery issue is something that kids will grab onto and bring home to their parents. Good work. I was really enthralled by the presentation you made today.
Vice Chair.
Yeah, forgive me, I'm going to ask a quick question because I know we're kind of up against some time deadline, but as a participant in the Egan Warming Center at the time of the ice storm, we created a resilient hub at 8th and A Street in downtown Springfield at the old Willamette Lane Center. As you were talking about the resilient hubs, I was thinking, how are people going to get there in a crisis? Is that part of the equation of funding, is transportation? Because I know that was a huge missing cog in the wheel during the ice storm. So that's my only question. Thanks.
I mean, I think that's part of the reason why we see the resilience hubs as places that are located everywhere, if possible. And so we have these pilot locations. And yes, it's not, our goal is to create locations that people could eventually even walk to. So in every community, you would have a place that people would be able to walk to get there. And I know that doesn't help as much in the ice storm.
Doesn't help when the ice is 2 inches thick on the road. Sure, yeah, you're right. But that was something that I think should be part of the equation, certainly, is what we have, how they're going to get there if it's not as close as we might think.
Well, in the interest of time, I'm going to ask a question that you are welcome to follow up in email, unless it's a very quick response, which is, well, two parts. When do we learn about the $19.9 million Resiliency Hub grant? Do we know when they'll notify?
Any day now.
And do we know, is it an all or nothing? Is there a possibility of partial award? And if so, have you already started to think about where you would scale depending on a partial award?
So we applied at the earliest possible opportunity so that we could get feedback on our award if we were unsuccessful, and then reapply, because this doesn't close until the end of November. It is possible, I think, for them to issue a partial award, but we will certainly reapply if we're not successful.
Great, thank you so much. And to Commissioner Farr's point about engaging children, I will just say, because the Climate Action Plan, one of the signature initiatives is our Clean Lane initiative, and that has an educational center component for that very reason. So, great. Thank you so much for your time this morning. Very appreciative.
Chair, may I ask one more brief question?
Please.
Thank you. I know this may not be the most impactful item, but I'm just hugely curious. are we able to put solar on our county buildings? And I know part of this is like battery storage capacity development issues. But is there funding for that kind of thing, and would it be effective?
There's certainly funding out there, and it's on my list to look at the next round of, there's a state funding opportunity called CREP. It's resiliency, blah, 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 anyway. And so we're looking at applying potentially next year. It's, the problem with these things is that the infrastructure costs a lot of money, and they oftentimes just have, a portion of that. So it's like this puzzle game to put together funding that can be used together to support something like that. And, yeah.
Thank you so much. This is really important. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of money. So it's great that we took a little extra time with this item, and appreciate you and look forward to more updates and reports and good news in the future. Thank you so much. With that, we'll move on to our Holiday Farm Fire Recovery Update. This is a quarterly update, and so we've been in communication with staff. Mr. McCray knows we're a little tight for time, but as always, he's great at working with us on the fly. And because it's a quarterly update, we know we'll hear back soon. So thank you for your patience and generosity with adjustments on time this morning so we could devote a little more to that previous presentation.
Okay, so Chair Trieger, so we'll just go right to it. So I'm joined at the table, of course, by Matt and Rob. We'll just cut to the presentation.
Thank you, and I might have you actually help me project this while we get started, if that's all right. Thank you. Thank you, Chair, Commissioners. Matt McCray, I'm the Disaster Recovery Manager for Lane County. I'm joined by Rob Woodard, who is our Special Districts Project Manager. And I just want to acknowledge the effort that Public Works has made to lean in on wildfire recovery. We had some water systems and wastewater systems that desperately needed repairs and additional work, and not only did Public Works lean in and hire somebody, but they hired the right person, and Rob's done amazing work over the last couple of years to help get things straightened out, especially for the community of Blue River. In terms of slides, I'm just going to go through the normal set of slides. I have just a few updates, and then I'd like to reserve the bulk of the time for your conversation or questions, particularly for Rob, because he's here available today in person. I know we've had questions about water and wastewater in the past, and I just felt I'd bring the expert to join us at the table. Thank you, Steve. So you've seen these before. I'm going to go through them fairly quickly. The total number of dwellings that were lost in the Holiday Farm fire was 517. We've seen 255 dwelling permits issued, with 62 that are currently in process and 191 dwellings that are complete. So you can see there, 37% of the total dwellings lost have been replaced at this point. I will continue to reiterate that many of those are the households who had full insurance and or other financial resources, so the lower income households are not as represented in that 37%. This is the same numbers, just showing you over time. On the left is 2021, on the right 2024. These numbers from June 27th of this year. You can see the homes completed, again, there are 191, and June of last year, 139. So you get a sense of kind of the number of homes that are still being built. A couple of points I'd like to make here. One, we haven't seen any federally funded homes being built yet. So we know that there's somewhere on the order of 60 to 65 households who are going to be eligible for HARP funding, which is the home repair program for households, property owners who lost their homes in the fire. So we should see some dwellings being built with those dollars in the near future. I also want to highlight the fact that the state has decided to change the way that they're allocating these funds. Initially, they were going to do a phase of just 80% area median income households and below, and they've bumped that up, so they're going to simultaneously be doing those households between 80% and 120% and supporting all those homes in rebuilding, which is great. We've advocated for that, and it's great to see the state taking that step. I'd also like to highlight another change they made to the programs. They have a home ownership opportunities program, which is $12.5 million for our area. And initially it was just home ownership opportunities, and we urged them to also create a rental housing opportunity so that we could build affordable rental housing to make that available upriver as well. So, and they've done that, so we're glad to see that change. I also want to highlight, as I did in the report for you, that OHCS is indicating a desire to have Lane County administer those HOP funds, that $12.5 million for home ownership opportunities, and so we're engaging in a conversation with them about that right now. One more thing to flag for you is that last time we were here, you authorized us to use $1.3 million in the grant funds that we have from OHCS for housing. That program is now working. That's in partnership with the Long-Term Recovery Group. They've been doing amazing work getting households, particularly seniors and folks with disabilities, set up with homes. We have people who already have moved in now, and we just found some additional dollars from that intergovernmental agreement to push towards purchasing additional homes for households that are, again, in seniors and those with disabilities. Lastly, I want to highlight the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program. Kristen was just talking about resilience hubs, and she mentioned the school. I think you're all aware of the important role that the school played post-fire is a place that people could get out of the way and gather. It was also defended very effectively by the fire services upriver. We were awarded a grant from FEMA for $2.5 million to make investments in those school buildings to make them better able to resist wildfires, windstorms, snowfall, etc. So we're making those same investments outside of the program that Kristen mentioned. We're looking for all funding to boost the opportunities for resilience hubs in Lane County. And lastly, on that note, with that hazard mitigation grant program, I just want to acknowledge my colleague Megan Hurian, who's been working really hard on the request for proposals for engineering services for that project. She's done a tremendous amount of work to make sure that we get that project off on the right foot. So thanks to Megan. A couple of quick highlights here with images. So the Rose Street project is a project that the Lane County has put $800,000 toward. It's affordable housing project, single-family homes, 6 dwellings in downtown Blue River. And so we now have some sketches of what these units are expected to look like, and we continue to partner with Mackenzie Community Land Trust on that project. Chair Trieger mentioned the tour that took place just a week ago. Thank you, Chair, for joining us for that tour. It's great to have you up there. And I'm just a couple of photos here to give people a sense of what we were looking at. We're now seeing interiors of some of these buildings being finished out. This is the library, the O'Brien Memorial Library. It's great to see that getting really close to being ready to occupy. And lastly, we've talked a lot about wastewater and water, and I'm just going to turn it over to Rob to give you a brief update on both of those projects and then questions for Rob.
Okay, certainly. So on the water side of things, there is the Blue River Community Water Project that's proposed. We're done with the feasibility study. We're about 80% done with design. We'll start the permitting process in September and plan to start going out to bids or gather bids from construction companies to actually construct the facilities first quarter of next year. So that is on track and actually a little bit above or a little bit ahead of schedule. On the wastewater side, we finished up 18 months of a feasibility study to determine what the two properties could provide as far as wastewater service goes. And so now we're at the point where that has been completed. We have a direction going forward, and now we just issued the notice to proceed to HDR to start the engineering and construction services part of that project. So that's a big milestone. Probably take the rest of the year to do the design, and I anticipate if we can gather up the proper funding to at least do a phased approach on construction for wastewater starting middle of next year. So that's kind of where we're at. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Yeah.
That's all we have. Yeah. Thank you so much, Chair.
Great. And I will turn it over to the board for questions, conversation, comments to the board. Commissioner Senega.
Yeah, just real quick, thanks both of you, Mr. Woodard. Great to meet you earlier today. Really enjoyed our short conversation about the different systems we've considered out there and how unique that is and with the watersheds and so on and so forth. So I just want to take a second and say we appreciate the work you're doing out there.
Oh, you bet.
Commissioner Farr.
Thank you. Good presentation and good graphics, good visuals. I'm intrigued by the 37%. You say as the lower income families are the ones who are having the most difficulty replacing. Let's elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Chair Traeger, Commissioner Farr. Yeah, it really is just a result of those households who were fully insured or have other means to help pay for construction are more able to reconstruct. So if you take a drive up the Mackenzie, you'll see the majority of the homes that have been rebuilt are very big, fairly expensive homes. So it really is just that. So those households with lower incomes oftentimes were under or uninsured. I mean, there's some overlap there. And just having a harder time dealing with the inflation that we've seen since the fire, especially in the construction sector, and now the rising interest rates are just that confluence of circumstances is really making reconstruction challenging, especially for low-income households.
And I'd like to hear more about what we're doing to help the lower-income households. And right now is not a good time, but we can talk more about that because one thing we've talked about is some people are resorting to living in temporary housing while they wait for their home to be built. And if that is extended, are we allowing people to stay in RVs or what typically wouldn't be considered to be habitable?
Yeah, Chair Trigger, Commissioner Farr, yes, at this point we are continuing to allow people to stay in RVs, which is not an ideal situation, as you point out. We're working with the resources that we have direct control over to get homes built and available as quickly as possible, but we have a very limited pot of funds compared to those federal funds that are at the state. And so we're doing everything we can to support our state partners to land those dollars in and get construction going as quickly as possible.
And I know you have an eye on all of these balls that are being juggled in the air because as people do live in, I'll call it not fit for regular habitability. I mean, people use RVs, but not to live in extendedly. And then the waste issue becomes a serious issue. And I'm presuming that we have a mitigation effort in place there.
We do. Thank you, Commissioner Farr. Yes, we have a really robust program in partnership with Eugene Water and Electric Board. As you all are aware, the Mackenzie is the source of drinking water for Eugene, and so there's a lot of emphasis on making sure we protect the water quality in the Mackenzie. So EWEB already had a no interest loan program in place to help people repair and replace septic systems. As soon as we had funding available, in fact, it's some of the same funds that Rob's working with, we put some of those dollars towards that program and turned that into a grant program. So EWEB very graciously supported that program and is administering grants to help people replace and repair septic systems right now. They've already dispersed hundreds of thousands of dollars, including funds from DEQ, which were matched with the Lane County funds. So yes, a huge investment in that direction.
So can I read that to be that while we wait for permanent residences to be built, the other 63% that we're waiting for, that in some cases the waste systems are being replaced so that the temporary housing is using sanitary and secure waste systems?
Wherever possible, that is our aim, yes.
That's what I thought I heard you say, so thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Rob, for all of your dedication and hard work upriver and to the other waste systems that you're dealing with around the entire county, especially in the rural parts where there are several that have reached their end of their lifespan and really have no idea what they're going to do next. And you've been a key player in trying to push that big rock up the hill and find solutions. So thank you for your work. And just for the board's education, like the real source of money and funding for those folks that are under the income level to rebuild upriver is the federal HOP and HARP money that is coming forward, that has taken so long to get on to the ground here and still has not yet reached us. And so I want to publicly thank Governor Kotek for helping push that funding down to the local level and making some updated changes in the disaster recovery section of OHCS in order to make that happen. She's been a staunch supporter of Lane County in that regard, and I appreciate it greatly. We're seeing those changes come through, and I'm really excited about being able to get that funding on the ground quicker, because without that federal money, these folks that are our most vulnerable, that never had the money in the first place to be able to rebuild, just won't have that opportunity until these programs are in place. Thank you. Thank you.
Vice Chair, did you want to?
Nothing more to add. Yeah, I mean, obviously you got a lot of challenges ahead of you, and infrastructure is the biggest one. So thanks for tackling that big job.
Thank you. Can you remind me, I'm sure you've, of the 517 dwellings lost, do we know how many were rental versus owner-occupied and or second homes?
We don't
have a breakdown.
Yeah, we don't have a firm number. It's somewhere on the order of 100. But yeah, I don't have a firm.
Because, of course, that's undoubtedly a big part of why lower-income folks haven't been able to return, is if they were renters and these funds that come down from the feds and the state aren't for rebuilding rental properties. That's a big part of the problem.
Yes, correct, Chair.
Yep, thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks again. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Chair.
Great. We are moving through. We are on item E, which is an order before us, 24-07-16-07, in the matter of awarding a contract to Sanapak Incorporated in the amount of $1 million to provide recycling, composting, and waste management services for Lane County facilities and parks, and delegating authority to the county administrator to execute the contract. And I'll welcome David Ward, our Facilities and Capital Improvement Manager, and Angie Marzano, who it's been a long time since we've had you before the board, our engineering analyst. Good morning, welcome, good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and Commissioners. We want to give you a little bit of background on this board order before you, a little bit of history, highlight a couple things, and then we have a few slides also to give an opportunity to share a little bit more detail behind this as well. Sorry for the brief pause here. All right, thank you. So the order you have before us is, in summary, it's just a proposed contract for a 3-year term agreement for comprehensive recycling, composting, and waste management services. This is for 59 of our county-owned facilities and includes parks. And in accordance with the Oregon revised statutes governing public procurements, the service contract scope of work was advertised as a formal RFP for competitive bidding, and Sanapak was the sole responsive bidder. So back in January, Waste Management, Angie reached out to me, and we formed a bit of a partnership to try to evaluate what our current service levels are across the county-owned facilities and our parks. We found a lot of inefficiencies, and we also discovered that we've never had a formal and unified contract that was competitively bid out for recycling, compost, and waste management services. And so during 2022, 2023, our total annual expenditures for these services exceeded $817,000. So we felt like it was an opportunity to form sort of a reset with how we contract these services, trying to get them underneath a unified umbrella so we could better understand what services are actually being provided. Is there an opportunity to right-size some of these services at different buildings and our parks? And just better understand what we're paying for, have better transparency from our vendor, et cetera. So again, this contract is proposed to be a not-to-exceed term of 3 years, and the service rates is included in the packet. So we'll go through our slides here just to explain a little bit more information behind this effort. So there's 3 plans that highlight the need for a strategic oversight of services. That's Solid Waste Management Plan, which was approved in 2019, the Climate Action Plan, approved in 2020, and as we heard previously from Kristen, and then our Lane County Strategic Plan that was approved in 2022. And furthermore, there isn't a current program in place, per this list of bullets at the bottom here. A periodic internal assessment and reporting of findings is imperative for us to establish and maintain a successful program moving forward. So the primary objectives of this effort is we need to reduce the overall cost of services across all of our internal county-owned facilities and parks. This will benefit the fiscal bottom line for all departments. Second, it'll improve reporting, analysis, and transparency between the service provider and the county. This will provide building managers access to the information they need to better manage and improve their waste and recycling streams under their individual purview. And third, this effort will provide an opportunity to help educate county employees the importance of environmental stewardship within their purview and how they can do their part to improve recovery rates across our entire organization.
So to illustrate opportunities for improvements across departments, I'd like to bring your attention to where we think there's significant improvements that we can make to a couple of key departments. The graph represents total expenditures for waste management services from 2021 to 2023. As David said, we spent close to $817,000. Over that same time, we saw an 8% increase over that 3-year period, while service provider rates only increased an average of 3%. Last year, we saw a 16% increase in total waste costs, while our volume of waste across facilities declined. We attribute this to on-call services, we attribute this to lack of oversight and no recycling available at our facilities. 3 departments represent 65% of the county's waste cost: Parks, Health and Human Services, and Lane County Sheriff Office. And I'll go into more detail about those departments in the next slide. So by department, like I said, these 3 departments represent the majority of the waste. We know that they have specific challenges. For example, parks represents 29%, and that's really because of the breadth of parks across our county. They're oftentimes managed by park hosts, which are making calls for on-call service. Our parks are very seasonal in use, so we have consistent service, whereas we see dips in use across park facilities that aren't being used as much during winter season. Health and Human Services, they have significant shred costs and then biomedical waste needs, and so we can do something with managing that. And then the Sheriff's Office, we know from a waste characterization study that we did in that facility that 70% of the waste that they generate is organic waste through the jail. So we see that there's a significant opportunity at that facility. So just to do a little bit of a deep dive into one of the facilities, and then I'll go into talking about parks. The jail, like I said, annually they generate about 652,000 pounds of waste a year. 70% is recoverable. We believe it can be segregated and it can be sent to Lane Forest Products or Rexius for compost. We know that they have space restrictions. However, we've spoken to Sanipack. We believe that we can right-size containers. We can improve adding roll carts into the facility that allow them to take containers out because they do have a limited enclosure space. But we plan on meeting with their team on August 7th to discuss two potential solutions, and that would be reducing the size of the container and sort of right-sizing calls and pickups, and then also adding that food waste that I spoke about. What's cool about the jail project is that by just adding organic collection, we can increase our recovery rate at that facility alone by 30 to 40% because organics are so heavy. So that would help us countywide achieve a 63% recovery rate, which you guys know we're always talking about. Next slide. So parks, I spoke about the breadth of our parks. Like I said, we have on-call and scheduled service. We have rural parks that distance makes it oftentimes difficult to service some of those parks. We're only offering recycling opportunities for our park customers at 28% of those. And so we think there's a way for us to add service that would reduce our overall waste at our parks. And we know that our customers desire those services as well. So we've spoken to Brett Henry, the parks manager. He's really excited about the data that our team supplied him, and he wants to hit the ground running with some of these recommendations. So we're excited to start working with them next week on how to implement some of these strategies. So I don't know if you guys saw last week, we just wanted to test some of our anecdotal information about accessibility in our own facilities. And so we sent out an all-employee survey, sort of gauging awareness around recycling and waste prevention attitudes for our employees. In 7 days, we had 103 responses. We had 19 green team signups, and these were employees that were like, yes, I want to help. I want to do something to improve recycling at my facility. We learned that 58% of the respondents say that at the facility that they work, recycling is not adequate or somewhat adequate. We know that 31% of Lane County employees are taking recycling home because they don't have any place to put recycling in our facilities. And then they desire hard to recycle services like batteries and styrofoam, things that we know that we're generating through waste characterization studies that we've done. So this is just like a snapshot that happened 7 days ago, and I just thought it was good context for this discussion. And we're hoping to reach out to these employees and start working with David and his team to implement the strategies that Waste Management has laid out.
So finally, next steps by objective. The contract amount, again, is a not-to-exceed 3-year contract value of $1 million. We anticipate the first-year cost to be in line with current costs. And as we refine and optimize the service details across our portfolio of facilities, the estimated $180,000, which is basically a difference between what we're currently spending over the same 3-year time period, over the next 3 years will provide some flexibility to us as we modify the frequency or type of service across the county facilities, especially during this first year without necessitating an amendment to the contract. Adding a Power BI dashboard working with tech services gives us the live monthly data and will help inform analysis and much needed oversight of this entire program. We will meet with departments and their primary facility contacts to identify and recommend areas of improvement, and we'll continue employee engagement and outreach with this recycling survey and training, which is this summer through the fall. And I just want to emphasize again the collaborative efforts during the last several months between Lane County Facilities Management and Custodial Services and Angie specifically with the Public Works Waste Management Department. And just as a follow-up item moving forward, we would like the opportunity to report back to the board during the summer of 2025 to provide an update on the recovery goals achieved during this next calendar year. So in closing, any questions?
Thank you so much for the presentation to the board. Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really pleased that the analysis went on. I guess I assumed that that was always happening. But to know that it wasn't, and that you're already on top of it and reviewing the needs and working with Santa Pac, I appreciate them being willing to contract with us to make the needed changes. It's really going to make a dent in, the actual waste management portion that's going to be able to be recycled. And that, to me, is the most exciting part about it, knowing that that 63% is a goal, but I'd love for it to be higher. And really, if it saves money at the same time, it's a win-win. Thank you.
Seeing any other comments, I'll just appreciate the work, and absolutely, we look forward to you coming back mid-year next year so that we can hear how it's been going. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Oh, so we have an order. We have an order. We have an action. We have an order. And maybe there'll be some discussion to the motion, should it be made and seconded. So with that,
Chair, I'd like to move to award a contract in the amount of not to exceed $1 million for 3 years to Santa Pac Inc. to provide recycling, composting, and waste management services for Lane County facilities and parks, and delegating the authority to the county administrator to execute the contract.
Second.
thank you. It's been moved by Vice Chair and seconded by Commissioner Buck to approve Order 24-07-16-07. Is there any discussion to the motion? Great, thank you. We got, so in the groove of reports and updates, I forgot we had an order before us. So with that, I will call for the vote. All those in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Approval of Order 24-07-16-07 in the matter of awarding a contract to Santa Pac Incorporated in the amount of $1 million to provide recycling, composting, and waste management services for Lane County facilities and parks, and delegating authority to the county administrator to execute the contract. Thank you again so much to staff for your work in presenting this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, to the administrator for any announcements.
Not today.
All right, then our last item on the agenda this morning, we do not have need of executive session, is from Human Resources. And I will welcome Andrea Nagels, our Senior Assistant County Counsel, and Kristen Mayfair, Senior Management Analyst, to the table. We've got our HR Director standing by and a whole fleet of folks. Good morning. And this is a single item from Human Resources, Order 24-07-16-06, in the matter of approving a tentative agreement between Lane County and the Lane County Prosecuting Attorneys Association. Good morning.
Just a brief introduction. As the board knows, we have 8 bargaining units in Lane County. It's a lot of different groups that we work with to negotiate contracts. Each year, we're negotiating anywhere from 2 to 4 bargaining contracts. And so I just want to thank our bargaining team, Lane County's bargaining team, Andrea Nagels, our Senior Assistant County Counsel, and Kristen Mayfair, our Senior Labor Relations Analyst, who are here representing Lane County's team, and also extend our appreciation to the Prosecuting Attorneys Association members for their work. It's very extensive. A lot of work goes into negotiating these agreements, and we're very pleased that we have a tentative agreement with you. So I'll turn it over to Andrew.
Steve. Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, Commissioners. We are here this morning to present the tentative agreement for the collective bargaining agreement between Lane County and the Prosecuting Attorneys Unit. This unit represents approximately 28 attorneys in the District Attorney's Office. Following the priorities, goals, and objectives that were set by this board, we began bargaining with this unit in January of this year. And through the bargaining process, we were able to reach a tentative agreement with the association. Under the tentative agreement, the total estimated additional cost for the contract changes is up to approximately $2,607,380, and that's over a 3-year period. I'll hand it over to Kristen to provide a little bit more detail about those economic pieces.
Thanks, Andrea. Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and Commissioners. The estimated cost that Andrea just referred to consists of costs of living, or COLAs, and other adjustments. We have seen a shift in how our comparators approach setting COLAs for their employees, and we have begun to follow the same model to help ensure that our wages remain competitive within the market. So the COLA for each of the 3 years is based on the Consumer Price Index West Region annual average, with a minimum of 2% and a maximum of 5% based on what the CPI is for the previous calendar year. So, for example, the first year of the contract, 24-25, we are looking at the annual average CPI for the calendar year 2023, which we do know is 4.3%. If the tentative agreement is approved by the board, employees represented by this contract will receive the 4.3% adjustment retroactive to the first full pay period in the 24-25 fiscal year. As you are aware, the county is transitioning away from the decision band method for determining classifications and compensation structures. PAA was one of our groups that used the DBM method. While we did not have to change any classification descriptions, we did need to move to a different salary plan structure. The salary table shown in the packet was developed by Eliza Kaczynski, our senior classification and compensation analyst, who worked with budget manager Christine Moody to develop a table that closely aligned with current PAA wages while conforming to the structure of the new comparable classification criteria, or C3 as we call it. In addition to moving to the new salary plan, all 4 PAA classifications were placed on a new C3 grade, which provides a salary increase. On-call pay was also increased. In order to help control current and future costs related to healthcare plans, PAA agreed to provide all new employees hired after January 1, 2025, access to only the high deductible and plus plans. I do need to note that there is a typo in the summary part of the packet, and it says that employees hired through December 31st, 2025 should say December 31st, 2024. It is accurate in the contract language and on the tentative agreement. Employees hired before January 1, 2025 will retain access to the copay plan, but should they choose a different plan in a future year, they will not be able to return to the copay plan. Additional health plan modifications include an increase to copays for specialist office visits under the Plus Plan and Copay Plan. Under the Plus Plan and the Copay Plan, specialty drugs will require a 30% coinsurance up to a $100 employee maximum. All plans will be subject to generic preferred drugs, with brand name drugs covered only when medically required by the employee's physician. Employees and their spouses who use tobacco products will pay a monthly surcharge of $25 per month per person. The annual out-of-pocket maximum is increasing for all plans, and the ability for an employee to receive full funding of the high deductible plan and into their HSA or HRA VEBA account will be dependent upon the completion of an annual health risk assessment, but continues to still provide employees with an option to have their high deductible fully funded. It is because of the min-max COLA range for subsequent years that the full estimated additional cost for the 3 years of the contract ranges between $2,011,132 and the $2,607,380 that Andrea had mentioned.
Thanks, Kristen. And in addition to the economic items that Kristen just outlined, we were also able to clarify some of the non-economic pieces under the contract and also add some additional non-economic pieces to the contract. The board summary in the packet has a summary of all of the economic and non-economic changes of the contract. The contract is for 3 years, the tentative agreement, and so if that's approved, it will expire on June 30th of 2027. I'm happy to report that the Prosecuting Attorney Association has voted on the contract, and they have voted to ratify the agreement. We would like to acknowledge the individuals who are on the bargaining team, including those that were on the Prosecuting Attorney Association team. That's Spencer Gwartney, Kate Dixon, David Jampolsky. And from the county, we had Kristen Mayfair, Carrie Crabtree, Christine Moody, Eliza Kaczynski, James Trujillo, and former DA Patty Perlow. And we have also spoken, DA Chris Peroza could not be here today. He's out of state, but he is also very much in support of this contract. And we also should mention our labor relations manager, Inga Wood. And with that, we will turn it over to the board for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the presentation. To the board for questions, comments, Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the team on both our bargaining team and the union team, of course. I want to thank all the 28 prosecuting attorneys that are involved. Thank you for working for Lane County and continuing with us. I know that it's had that division has had some challenges in the last year or two, and we appreciate you working with us and moving through those to get to a great agreement here today. Thank you, Chair.
All right, looks like that's it. I will just add my appreciation and to any attorneys who may be watching or tuning in later. We talk a lot about, this board agrees a priority is a strong public safety system, and they are absolutely part of that. So we appreciate their work to contribute to the public safety of everyone in Lane County. So thank you. Thank you to the staff presenters, to the team in the back of the room. We appreciate you all. Great work. 1 down, 7 to go. Yeah. Great. Thank you. With that, I will look for a motion to the order before us.
Thank you, Chair. Inc., I did notice that you weren't checked off, so I had your back there. And again, thanks for getting another jewel in y'all's crown. This is really great work. Chair, I'd like to move the board to approve Order 24071608 in the matter of approving the tentative agreement between Lane County and Lane County Prosecuting Attorneys Association.
And I would love to second that.
All right, it's been moved by Vice Chair and seconded by Commissioner Farr. Any discussion to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Approval of Order 24-07-16-08 in the matter of approving an agreement between Lane County and the Lane County Prosecuting Attorneys Association. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We do not have need of an executive session this morning, so unless there's anything else from the administrator or any members of the board, at the sound of my gavel, we will be recessed, and we will reconvene here in Harris Hall for a 1:30 time certain to kick off our afternoon business, and that'll be a first reading and setting a second reading and public hearing on an ordinance. With that, we are in recess.